My name is Junie Hale, and last Christmas was the lowest point of my life, or so my mother, Brenda, thought. At 25, I was made to eat a microwaved meal on the porch in freezing rain while my brother, Crew, and his friends toasted to my failure inside the warm house. Brenda never missed a chance to remind me that my minimum wage existence was a shame, a blemish on the family name. I shivered under my thin coat, biting back tears as their laughter cut through the cold air. But what she didn't know was that the $100 million lottery ticket she saw slip from my pocket was fake. The real one had been cashed weeks earlier, and $90 million was already funding a charity helping kids aging out of foster care. I had played the long game, and the look on her face when she realized her claim was worthless would be a memory I'd treasure forever. Life hadn't been easy. I'd put my own college dreams on hold to care for a sick family member who eventually passed, leaving me with nothing but medical debt and a sense of being invisible. I worked 2 retail jobs just to keep afloat, yet Brenda treated me as if I were a disappointment she had to endure. Crew, on the other hand, thrived under her praise. He lived in a luxury apartment she paid for, spent his days gambling online and posting content for his brand. And yet he was celebrated as a shining example of ambition. Every birthday, every holiday, every achievement, real or imagined, was a chance for Brenda to show the world she had produced success. And I was the family embarrassment, the cautionary tale, the daughter who would never amount to anything. It was exhausting, both physically and emotionally. I felt trapped between loyalty and survival, trying to scrape together a life that felt meaningful in a household that judged me by every dollar I earned and every dream I couldn't pursue. But hope has a funny way of finding its moment. When I bought a Powerball ticket that December morning with my last dollar, I wasn't dreaming about winning. I was performing a small ritual, a flicker of defiance against the life that seemed determined to crush me. And then the numbers came. Every single one matched. For a moment, I didn't feel joy. I felt clarity. I realized this money wouldn't just change my life. It could rewrite my story on my terms. I could repay my debts, create something lasting in honor of the grandmother who had quietly believed in me, and most importantly, hold space for my own dignity in a world that had refused to see it. The stage was set, the players in place, and I was ready to turn the next chapter into a story of justice, cunning, and finally freedom. This Christmas, the table had been turned. I was no longer the girl on the porch. I was the one holding the power, and I planned to use it wisely. Brenda always made it clear that success meant everything to her. She ran a small but successful interior design business, built using a loan from my late grandmother, Odette. To her, every corner of the house, every decoration, every arrangement of flowers was a reflection of her taste and her effort. And me? My retail jobs, my long hours, the way I worked to pay bills and survive, none of it mattered. She never missed a chance to make me feel small, as if my hard work was invisible, worthless, and embarrassing. Crew, my older brother, seemed to float through life without effort. Brenda paid for his luxury apartment, and he spent most of his days posting content online, trying to grow his social media following and gambling. Whenever he needed money, he came to me. I gave it because I couldn't say no to family, but he never paid me back. Watching him enjoy luxuries while I struggled to make rent and pay bills was crushing. Our house was beautiful, almost like a showroom, but the beauty of it came with rules I could never meet. Brenda's love was never simple or easy. It was given only when she decided I had accomplished enough. A good grade, a little recognition, a raise at work, none of it seemed to count. Every failure, real or imagined, was magnified. My struggles, my debts, my long hours, all of it made me invisible at best. At worst, it made me a target. She took any opportunity to remind me I was falling behind, that I was not enough, that I would never be like Crew. Even simple conversations became tests. If I mentioned money troubles, she acted annoyed, like I was asking for her sympathy. If I spoke about saving for something important, she scoffed. Crew, on the other hand, could brag about his lifestyle, borrow money from friends, or gamble recklessly, and she would beam with pride. It was as if my existence was only justified when I served as a contrast to him. I learned to hide my frustration. I worked my shifts, paid my bills, and tried not to notice her looks of disappointment. But deep down, the weight of all this pressure, debt, and constant belittling pressed on me every single day. It was exhausting to live in a home where nothing I did felt good enough, where my successes were ignored and my failures displayed. Despite all this, I kept going. I saved what little I could, worked longer hours, and kept dreaming quietly. I knew I had to survive, even if nobody else saw the struggle I carried. The more they tried to shame me, the more I understood that their approval was never the goal. My life, my future, my choices, those were the only things that mattered. After working a grueling double shift, I felt drained in every way. My feet ached, my head was pounding, and my last dollar felt like nothing. Still, I stopped at the corner store and bought a single Powerball ticket. It wasn't really about winning. I didn't dare dream that big, but it was a small act, a flicker of hope, a tiny rebellion against everything that had pushed me down. Clutching that slip of paper, I felt a strange mix of exhaustion and stubborn defiance. The next morning, I sat alone in the stockroom under the harsh fluorescent lights, my cracked phone in hand. My eyes scanned the numbers on the screen, matching them to my ticket. Slowly, carefully, I checked again. Every number matched. All of them. I froze. My heart pounded, but it wasn't the wild, dizzying joy I expected. Instead, a cold, clear certainty settled over me. This wasn't just luck. It was opportunity. Sitting there, I thought about everything Brenda had said, every mocking laugh from crew, all the nights I had gone hungry or cold while they celebrated their comforts. I felt no celebration, no tears of relief. I felt focus, like a path had opened before me. This money wouldn't just solve problems, it would give me power, a chance to rewrite what had been unfair for so long. I could finally make choices that weren't dictated by debts, humiliation, or my family's judgment. I imagined the possibilities, not for frivolous luxuries, but for justice. Every insult, every moment of being overlooked, every time I had been made to feel less than deserved acknowledgement. This one could become more than a lifeline. It could become a statement. I could help those who had been ignored or mistreated, just like I had been. I could do it quietly, without anyone knowing, and still watch the impact ripple through the world. I leaned back in my chair, ticket in hand, and let myself feel the weight of the moment. It was heavy, not with pressure or fear, but with clarity. I finally had the means to act, to shape outcomes rather than just endure them. No more struggling blindly. No more waiting for approval or recognition from people who would never give it freely. For the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I didn't feel trapped. I didn't feel invisible. I felt decisive. I knew exactly what I wanted to do with this gift, and I wasn't going to waste a second. The world had underestimated me, treated me like I was nothing, and now, quietly and deliberately, I had the power to change everything. I knew I had to be careful. Winning that much money could change everything, but it could also bring attention I didn't want. With the help of a discreet financial advisor, I claimed the prize through a trust, keeping my name completely out of it. No flashy announcements, no media circus, just quiet, careful planning. I wanted control, and I wanted it on my terms. The first thing I did was take care of my own life. All my debts were gone within days. The crushing weight of unpaid bills, medical expenses, and overdue rent disappeared almost instantly. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of relief I hadn't thought possible. The money gave me freedom, but more than that, it gave me options. Next, I focused on something bigger. My grandmother, Odette, had always quietly helped people who had no one. Her kindness had been a secret, but it had inspired me. I wanted to honor her memory, so I created the Odette Foundation. It was simple in its mission: to provide housing and education grants to young adults who had aged out of the system. Kids who had nowhere to turn, no family support, and no guidance. They deserved a chance. Through the foundation, I could make a real difference, quietly helping people the way my grandmother would have wanted. I also made sure my own future was secure. I invested the remaining funds wisely, building a foundation that would support me and my projects for years to come. I didn't need to show off. I didn't need to change my outward life. To everyone around me, I was still the same Junie Hale working retail, struggling but enduring. I kept my jobs, kept my routines, and kept the mask of normalcy. But beneath it all, I was different. I had a plan and I had power. I could act when the moment was right, and I could finally shape things on my terms. Every insult, every bit of belittling from my mother, every glance of superiority from crew, they were all noted, stored, and waiting. The money wasn't just about survival or comfort. It was my tool for justice, my way to balance the scales that had always been tipped against me. I walked among the same people, kept my head down, and pretended nothing had changed. But I was no longer helpless. I had time, resources, and clarity. I was ready to wait for the perfect moment, and when it came, nothing would stop me. Brenda's invitation came like a test I couldn't refuse. The annual Christmas Eve party was always a grand affair, full of wealthy friends, sparkling decorations, and conversations meant to display her success. Every year, she made sure everyone knew who had achieved the most, who was worth praising, and who, like me, was a disappointment. This time, I knew she wanted me to be the highlight of the evening, but in the worst way possible. I began planning carefully. Every detail mattered. I decided to show up in my old, worn work clothes, the ones I wore during my shifts at the store. They were faded, frayed, and plain, the perfect costume for the role Brenda expected me to play. The struggling daughter, cold and unimportant. I wanted her and her friends to see exactly what they thought I was, but nothing more. Alongside my appearance, I prepared a prop, a perfect photocopy of the lottery ticket. It was carefully aged, creased, and made to look like it had been carried around for weeks. Every fold and mark was intentional. It had to be flawless because I wanted it to play its part at just the right moment. It wasn't about money yet. It was about timing, about setting the stage for a lesson she wouldn't forget. I practiced my behavior too. I walked through the motions in front of the mirror, imagining every interaction. My shoulders would slump, my hands would tremble slightly from cold or fatigue. My voice would be quiet and uncertain. I pictured Brenda's smirk as she turned toward her guests, sure that everyone would be laughing at me. I rehearsed the way I would enter the room, keeping my gaze low, pretending to be embarrassed, shivering as though the cold had seeped into my bones. I thought about Crew too, always hovering nearby with his phone, ready to capture every moment for his social media audience. I had to make sure my act was believable, that it fit the story they had already written for me in their minds. Every gesture, every sigh, every hesitant step would add to the illusion. Even as I planned, I felt a strange mix of emotions, anticipation, anger, and a quiet satisfaction. For years, I had endured their ridicule, their favoritism, their constant judgment. Now I had the power to act, and every move had to be precise. There could be no mistakes. This party would not just be a display of their wealth and pride. It would become the perfect stage for something entirely unexpected. I finished my preparations, checking the ticket one last time, smoothing my worn coat, and taking a deep breath. Soon, I would step into the house, into the warmth, into the eyes of everyone who had judged me for so long. I would look small, cold, and defeated. But behind that act, I held everything, the power, the plan, and the patience to wait for the perfect moment. I arrived at the party, taking a deep breath before stepping inside. Almost immediately, Brenda's eyes landed on me, and her smile twisted into that sharp, mocking expression I had learned to fear. "Really, Junie?" she said loud enough for everyone to hear. "Is that what you're wearing?" The room went quiet for a second before a few polite laughs followed. Crew, of course, was ready with his phone, filming every second, his face split with amusement. I kept my head down, forcing my shoulders to slump, shivering slightly as though the cold had seeped through my coat. Brenda turned to her guests, sweeping her arms across the dining room. "The table is for family who have actually accomplished something this year," she said, her voice loud and proud. Then she pointed toward the small, wobbly table sitting on the enclosed porch. "You can eat out there, Junie. We wouldn't want to ruin anyone's perfect evening with reality." I forced a small nod and moved toward the porch, feeling every eye on me. The cold bit through my coat, but I tried to let it show just enough, not too much. As I settled into my seat, I could hear the clinking of glasses and murmurs from inside. Brenda raised her own glass, smiling at the crowd, and began a toast. "To Crew and his growing brand," she said, voice dripping with pride. "I'm buying him a brand new luxury car to celebrate his hard work this year. Some of us are born to build empires," she added, eyes flicking briefly in my direction. "And others, well, they're just meant to serve them." Her words cut through me, but I held my composure. I ate slowly, letting the cold porch and the small, uneven table reinforce the image I was creating. I could hear Crew laughing inside, probably replaying clips he had just filmed, while Brenda continued to entertain her guests with stories of her success and Crew's achievements. I pretended to focus on my plate, acting exhausted and defeated, but in reality, I was watching and learning. Every movement, every comment, every glance, they all became part of the plan. It was almost surreal, being treated like a joke in my own family while knowing I held all the power. The porch was freezing, the table wobbly, and my meal barely edible, but I stayed calm. I let the performance sink in for Brenda and her guests. They believed they were proving a point about me, showing everyone my supposed failures, but I knew something they couldn't see. Patience, preparation, and timing were mine. The night stretched on, and I kept my act perfect. Every insult, every laugh, every toast to Crew's success added fuel to the quiet storm I was building. I ate slowly, deliberately, letting my presence on that porch be seen as weakness while inside, I was stronger than I had ever been. By the time the dinner ended, I knew the moment I had been waiting for was getting closer. After finishing my meal on the cold, wobbly porch, I slowly gathered my things. My coat was thin, worn, and almost falling apart, but I wrapped it around myself as best I could. The chill made me shiver slightly, and I let my hands tremble a little, acting flustered and uncomfortable, just as I had practiced. I wanted every move to look natural, unplanned, as if I truly belonged outside while everyone else enjoyed the warmth inside. I stepped into the crowded foyer, careful to keep my posture low, shoulders hunched, eyes down. Crew and his friends were laughing, chatting loudly, their phones out, capturing every detail. Brenda was talking to her guests, her head held high, proud and confident. I moved slowly, pretending to struggle with my coat, letting the audience see the effort it took to manage such a cheap, threadbare thing. Then came the moment I had been waiting for. As I adjusted the coat, I pretended to fumble with the pocket, tugging it inside out in a clumsy, hurried way. My heart didn't race. Inside, I was calm, but my movements looked natural, accidental, unplanned. The folded photocopy of the lottery ticket slipped from the pocket, as though by chance. I let it drift down slowly, landing face up on the pristine white rug in the center of the foyer. I took a step back, shaking my head lightly, and brushed my hair from my face, maintaining the illusion of embarrassment. I glanced around the room, acting flustered, cold, and unsure, but inside I felt a quiet thrill. Every eye in the room had already begun to notice the ticket. Crew's laughter paused for just a second as he spotted it, his phone still in hand, now pointed in its direction. Brenda's attention flicked immediately, sharp and demanding, as she leaned forward to grab it. She snatched the ticket, clutching it to her chest, her face lighting up with excitement and greed. I let her reaction play out, keeping my composure, pretending to be nothing more than the poor, shivering daughter she expected me to be. Every gasp, every shocked exclamation from the crowd only added to the illusion. No one realized this was exactly what I had planned. I stepped back into the background, my coat still pulled tight, letting Brenda's greed take center stage. Her eyes shone with triumph as she held the ticket close, believing she had found a sudden fortune that had fallen into her hands. Crew's friends began whispering, some pointing, some filming, all caught up in the excitement of a windfall. And I watched silently, satisfied, knowing this flawless accident had set the stage perfectly for the next part of the plan. Every detail had worked as intended. My coat, my shivering act, the carefully aged ticket. They had created exactly the scene I needed. The room was tense, the attention on the ticket, and Brenda was completely unaware of what had really happened. The moment was perfect, and the plan was moving forward just as I had imagined. The moment the ticket hit the floor, the room seemed to freeze for just a second. One of Crew's friends was the first to notice. "Holy crap, that's the winning Powerball. $100 million, he shouted, his voice full of shock and excitement. Heads turned, eyes widening, and the chatter grew loud as everyone realized what they were seeing. The excitement spread like wildfire, and all attention shifted to the little slip of paper lying on the pristine rug. Brenda moved faster than anyone could have expected. In a sudden, almost desperate motion, she lunged for the ticket, snatching it from the floor before I could even react. Her hands clutched it tightly against her chest, and her voice rose shrill and demanding. "It's mine. It fell in my house. You think you deserve this? No, this is mine." She laughed sharply, almost maniacally, as though she had won more than just money. "This is a reward for my hard work. Finally it's coming to me." Crew, oblivious to everything except the opportunity to show off, had already pulled out his phone. He started filming, narrating to his friends like it was a big event just for them. "Look at this, $100 million. Can you believe it? My mom just grabbed it." He grinned, clearly thrilled that his supposed fortune was now public in his little circle. He didn't even notice me standing quietly, pretending to be small and cold. To him, this was another moment to brag, another clip for social media, another proof of his success in the family. Brenda's excitement was wild and raw. She paced a little, still clutching the ticket, her eyes darting around the room as if expecting everyone to bow to her newfound luck. Her words were sharp and hurried, almost frantic. Every time she said it was hers, Every claim about her hard work, she reinforced the idea that she had won something monumental, that she had outsmarted everyone, including me. She didn't notice the subtle satisfaction in my eyes, the quiet control I held over the situation. The friends around her were a mix of shock, admiration, and curiosity, unsure if they should intervene or just watch. Crew was laughing, talking, and recording every second, amplifying the chaos. Brenda's greed had completely taken over her, and she didn't even see how ridiculous she looked. Every move she made, every shriek and declaration, made it clear that money had unleashed a side of her that had been quietly building for years, a side fueled by envy, pride, and a desperate need for recognition. I stayed silent, cold, and composed, letting the scene unfold exactly as I had planned. The room was alive with noise and attention, all focused on Brenda's frantic greed. I knew this was just the beginning. Her obsession with the ticket, her sense of entitlement, and Crew's excitement had created the perfect setup. I didn't rush. I let the moment stretch, letting them show their true colors while I waited, quietly, for the right time to reveal the truth. I stayed by the door, calm and quiet, watching everything unfold. Brenda was holding the ticket like it was the most valuable thing in the world. She paced a little, her eyes darting around the foyer as she muttered about plans for a new chandelier, still clutching the paper to her chest. Crew was nearby, phone in hand, capturing every moment, oblivious to the bigger picture. The tension in the room was thick, and everyone's eyes were on Brenda and the supposed prize. I spoke softly, almost as if I didn't want to disturb anyone, but loud enough for her to hear. "Are you sure that ticket is valid, Mom? You might want to check the date it was cashed." My voice was calm, steady, and completely unshaken. I let the words hang in the air, giving her just enough time to look closer, to begin questioning what she thought was hers. Brenda blinked, confused at first, and then leaned in closer. She studied the ticket, her fingers shaking slightly as she compared it to something in her memory, or maybe just hoping her excitement had been real. Crew's friends gathered a little closer, murmuring, sensing that something had changed, though they didn't know exactly what. The room went quieter as Brenda's focus intensified, her breath quickening as her confident grin began to fade. Then the moment came. Recognition hit her slowly, like ice melting. Her eyes widened as she realized something was wrong. This wasn't the winning ticket. It was a perfect photocopy, carefully creased and aged, but a copy nonetheless. The real ticket had been cashed weeks ago. Her hands trembled as she held it up, and for a split second, she froze, unable to process what had just happened. The disbelief was clear. Her plan to claim my supposed fortune had failed before it even began. A shriek escaped her, sharp and full of pure frustration, anger, and greed. It was the sound of someone who had believed they had won everything, only to have it ripped away in an instant. Her voice echoed through the foyer, loud enough to make everyone in the room jump, and her face was red, her eyes wild. She couldn't hide the mix of rage and humiliation that boiled inside her. I stayed silent, leaning lightly against the doorframe, watching her crumble under the weight of her own ambition. Crew's friends murmured in shock, and even Crew seemed momentarily speechless, unable to process what had just happened. The smugness, the confidence, the sense of entitlement, all of it vanished in that single moment. For the first time that evening, I felt complete calm. The moment I had waited for, the moment where the truth would break Brenda's greedy grip, had arrived. She had exposed herself completely, and I didn't have to lift a finger. All I did was let the truth speak for itself. I took a deep breath, keeping my voice calm and steady, and spoke so that Brenda and everyone in the room could hear me. "I am the anonymous benefactor behind the Odette Foundation," I said. The words hung in the air, and for a moment, the room went completely silent. Crew froze, his phone slipping slightly from his hand, while Brenda's face went pale. She had thought she was the center of fortune and attention, but now the truth had shattered that illusion. Tomorrow, the newspapers would carry the story, making her public humiliation complete. I looked around at my family, their mouths open, eyes wide with shock. There was nothing more to say to them. I let them see the reality they had ignored for years. "The only thing you ever gave me," I said quietly but firmly, "was the clarity to know exactly what I don't want to become." I paused, letting the words settle, before turning toward the door. I didn't look back. For the first time in my life, I felt completely free. No judgment, no ridicule, no expectations, just peace. I walked out into the crisp night, the cold air brushing against my face, and for the first time in years, I smiled without thinking about anyone else. The weight of their criticism, the endless comparisons to crew, the constant sense of being less than, it was all gone. The future was mine, shaped by my own choices, my own values, and the quiet power I had finally claimed. Months later, I sat in my new apartment, a space that was simple but beautiful, full of light and calm. It wasn't grand or flashy, but it was mine. The walls were quiet, the furniture comfortable, and the air carried a sense of home I had never truly known. I opened the latest stack of grant applications for the Odette Foundation. Each one was a story of struggle, hope, and determination, and I felt honored to be part of giving these young adults a chance at a better life. I smiled as I read through the applications, thinking about how far I had come. From the cold porch, the mocking laughter, and the constant judgment, to this quiet, steady life where I could make a real difference, it felt surreal. I had turned pain and humiliation into something meaningful. The foundation was growing, the lives it touched were changing, and I finally understood what it meant to truly be in control of my life. I leaned back in my chair, a sense of calm and satisfaction washing over me. This was more than freedom. It was peace, it was purpose, and it was everything I had worked for in silence. Do you think Junie made the right choice by leaving her family behind? Or should she have confronted them differently, dear family? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'm curious to hear your opinion, and subscribe for more stories like this.